of our landscape series of lectures. Let me go to the PowerPoint full screen. And the title of this lecture is The Culture of Landscape, which means that we play with the capacities of landscape to inspire the culture in many, many ways. I will use the artists, how the artists were using always in every time landscape as an inspiring tool, an inspiring element in their description, in their artifacts. And we start with a very famous Italian medieval artist, Giotto, who dedicated his work to St. Francis or to religious paintings. And also he was making a revolution in art, reconquering the use of perspective in this, and as well at the same time going back to a realistic vision of the of people, of the scenes, and of landscape. So landscape here is a rather realistic landscape of Umbria, the place where St. Francis was mostly living. And this is a miracle. Francis is praying on a mountain, and then there is a man who is another protagonist of this miracle, who is drinking water from a spring or from a river. Here, there is the use of perspective, use of color, harsh and strong way to design the mountain. This is a very important starting point for us. We go to, we stay in Middle Ages with Ambrogio Lorenzetti, another very talented and famous painter who was invited by the city of Siena in Tuscany to celebrate the successful government. The title of this painting is The Effects of Good Government in the City. And this is one of the most famous painting of his series. This is in fact a fresco, and this very large scale of fresco in the town hall of Siena. The picture, the fresco, the way to depict landscape is very realistic also in this case. So this painter is following the wave of Giotto. The discover of realistic landscape give them the possibility to describe the real parts of the city. So we see here the city walls, a gate, and then we see many palaces, loggias, which are loggias where the actions of merchants and rich families are displayed. And then we recognize the cathedral, we recognize many towers. So we can recognize this is Siena. And at the same time, we can recognize the countryside of Siena, a hilly landscape, which is very famous in Italy. The joy of this painting, the positive light on this painting are very evident also with the use of colors, and also because all the scenes are really happy and without any trauma, any war or any attack. So the positive landscape is celebrated here. The same thing in another celebrative painting is in this case is not a fresco but is on wood, is by Piero della Francesca. So we have a series of very famous painters we are now in Renaissance, and this work is celebrating two very important figures. They are the Dukes of Urbino, one of the most successful, powerful, and also and also important for culture as a cultural center, which is the city of Urbino in Marche region. The two protagonists are Federico da Montefeltro and his wife Battista Sforza. They are portrayed with their profiles in a way that is following the image of emperors in ancient Rome. In Renaissance, ancient Rome is celebrated. So the two figures are on their profiles very well described in their elegant dresses, in every detail of their face, and the jewels, and the very detailed description of the dress, the elegant dress, the hair of the lady of Battista Sforza. But what is important for us is that they are proud of their territory. So they proudly show on the backside of the painting the careful and correct description of the Duke of the Duchy of the Duchy of Urbino. And so see the mild landscape with all the works for the cultivation, trees and different other plants. We see some village, but also we see the river, and on the back part we see a very careful a series of hills. On the back side of this painting, there is the triumph, is described the triumph of the dukes. Again, a very symbolic scene of the two important figures triumphant in their landscape. And so this also backside shows the beauty of landscape. Going on, we go to a negative, to a painting which is portraying a scene of a wedding which was destroyed by the attack of this man who is trying to stop the celebration. But this is taken from a novel in Decameron by Boccaccio. Sandro Botticelli is another very talented and very famous painter. We are still in Renaissance, and we see the use of perspective is more and more precise and important. What is important here is to say that this scene is portrayed in a realistic place, the pine wood of Ravenna, which was then in recent time protected by a project of clearing this. So this painting, the fame of this painting helped the defenders of this part of landscape to clear a project of demolition or of destruction. Anyway, we see in the forefront the scene of the wedding banquet, but then we see the trees very detailed, and then the water, the coastline of Ravenna, a castle, and mountains and sheep. Everything very well described, but also here in this case, very realistic landscape. Let's go on with this series of examples, still in Renaissance, with another very famous painter, Raphael, who was a master with Leonardo da Vinci, that we will see very soon, to describe the landscape. So here I only show you the landscape, the use of landscape with different colors, different attitude. This is more and more realistic, and you see that this painter is also suggesting the atmosphere, how going from the front to the backside of the painter to this far scene, the atmosphere is in a way making less visible all the scene, which is, and you see this countryside, here is a tower, and then there is a mountain. Going to Leonardo, also here, I only took a fragment of a painting where you can see a harbor city very well protected by walls, towers, and a very, very dramatic scene of mountains. Also here you see the atmosphere. So landscape is the protagonist of many of these paintings. But how this evolves in centuries? We are going to 19th century with Giovanni Fattori, a painter still from Tuscany. You can just recognize on yourself or guess how landscape is always a big part of the scene, but we can also recognize the different way of portraying the landscape, from Middle Ages to the perspective of Renaissance, or to the understanding of the atmosphere and of the different elements of landscape, to this to another way to describe it in 18th century. Also this very realistic, playing a lot with different kind of green, but also on the backside, a mountain and a village. Then we go to some avant-gardes, the Sublime by William Turner, very famous painting and very famous also painter, and very famous time of a turning point in paintings when different avant-gardes were changing a lot the way of depicting or describing scenes. And so we see a very dramatic scene with light going to change the vision of the landscape from the sky to this element reflected in the water, and we see here a bridge, and in the first front a boat. Going with this, we go to the pre-Raphaelites, how they see the landscape. You see, the atmosphere is completely different. Is also is a bit probably going back to kind of traditional places, the bath, the coast in Central Europe, or this is in England, in fact, in England, completely different atmosphere, different colors, but also here very realistic. So the fashion is following, giving us a wide selection of different landscape. Then we go to symbolism. I just take a few examples, but you can continue and use this guideline to find yourself landscape examples also in your culture. And after symbolism, we go to futurism, which is an Italian avant-garde at the beginning of 20th century, um, um, putting dynamism and machines, mechanical elements against the tradition, against the continuity of tradition. So we see that in this scene of a village with a hill, so traditional shape is cut by the train coming out from a gallery, and the train is dynamism, speedness, but also pollution, and it is the way to try to change the time, and also change the attitude of painting and all the arts. So here, all the possible scene, all the delicate and proportion description of landscape are completely changed, and it is also a play that make a deformation, also using very bright colors which are not really realistic. Let's go now to a second part of the lecture. The Grand Tour is probably very known to all of you, was a traditional way to complete the education of the important families in Europe. The Grand Tour was the way to go out from your place and go to be educated in a wider way, in a better and deeper way, in a travel, going to see, to explore, to understand other cultures. The Grand Tour had many. The main itinerary of Grand Tour was Italy, and so we have from Grand Tour a description of Italy, changing Italy from 17th century onward. One famous description, one famous Grand Tour is the Italienische Reise by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, you see, the beginning of 19th century. And Goethe is for us very important. Goethe was not a painter, but he was, of course, a poet and a man able to describe with words what he was saying. And so he left us a extraordinary and very famous guide of his Italian tour. I quote just a little part of Goethe description, because it's very important when he says landscape is a second nature for civil purposes. Civil purposes, according to his ideas, constitute the prime mover of landscape construction. It is artificialization of nature. There is therefore a unity and a common genetic matrix between the construction of the city and the construction of landscape. So he gives us also a comment or an idea how to understand landscape as a second nature, which is transformed by society, by communities for their own purposes, for their own main aim. And so they constitute the prime mover of landscape construction. So the way to transform natural landscape to artificial landscape. And he gives us also these two terms, urban, or he guides us to understand urban landscape and agricultural landscape, which we already described in the first lecture as typologies of landscape. And going back to Siena and to the painting we saw at the beginning of this lecture, urban landscape, agricultural landscape, they play together as two different parts of the same scene. And we see Goethe in a portrait, in a very classical pose, to enjoy the tradition and enjoy classical landscape. Then I go a bit faster just to propose you a selection of a grand tour in Italy from north to south, from Piedmont to southern Italy. Different landscape depicted in 19th century mainly, when which are also these works of art, very important for us to recognize the big transformation of many cities. We are in Turin, and we are on the river Po, with a very old bridge which was under transformation. We recognize the gate of the city, and we recognize the importance of this landscape or townscape. Also, the beauty of landscape in Lago Maggiore, Isola Bella, also very famous place for tourists or for enjoyment of the Grand Tour. And you see here how important is the landscape. From at the center is the island with monumental monumental palaces and elements which are mirrored beautifully in the water. And then you see all the mountains surrounding the lake. Then we have a series of beautiful painting by Canaletto and others, which are celebrating the beauty of Italian cities. So Piazza San Marco in Venice, in one of the most traditional ceremonies of this tauromaquia. And here you see the central perspective, the beauty of all this monumental place, and so cityscape or urban landscape in a feast into a very important day. Everything is very realistic, and here we go to a kind of painting which is following which is preventing photographs because it's very exact. And again, Venice in another celebration, the Redentore festivity in summer, which provides a bridge of boats over Canal Grande, reaching the Church of Redentore by Andrea Palladio. Also here, you see how the water landscape, the city landscape are really important protagonists of the work. So the selection of beautiful works in the Italian tour are very important. We go now to Florence, Piazza della Signoria, also depicted in a day of celebration, and Piazza San Pietro also. So the important places, the symbolic places, and we have to think that these work of arts were helping Italy to be understood as a nation, and as a nation of culture, as a nation of art. And so the selection of works during this time provided also a kind of awareness of the beauty and the need to protect these townscapes. We close the lecture with an invitation to do the same exercise that I did with art, also in literature. Why? There is a literary landscape, is a way to select literary works in the description of landscape. I give you this little sentence, just proposing that literary landscape are descriptions that occur in single points of a literary work or scattered throughout a literary work. Within the respective works, these descriptive units act primarily as a setting, scenario, and background of the action. Landscape reflect the emotion of the characters, create moods, motivate actions, and also serve as ornamental elements. Literary landscapes can also be representations in spatial relation to nature. So I invite you also to select, as I did with paintings and with the Grand Tour. I did it, in fact, with Goethe, to select pieces into literary works that you know of your own culture. And this can help you to see how landscape can be described by words, and how landscape becomes a very important element to help the work, the poetry to be settled into a scene, into a place. And so the workshop I propose is, with the help of your teacher, to create your own itinerary. So to use this lecture in the three components, one is the art, the second is the grand tour, which can be also the tour in your country. The other one is literature, but you can go on with photography and cinema. And so create itineraries through a different selection of places, and then try to find the different approaches in time and place, referring to your context and your culture. Thank you for following the second lecture. We will continue to the third lecture.